Welcome to Moving Medicine Forward, a podcast presented by CTI Clinical Trial and Consulting Services. This podcast is centered on advancements in healthcare and elevating individual stories and their expertise. I'm your host, Jeremy Schran, and together with my co-host, Raina Graham,
hello,
we will take you through a deep dive of CTI, clinical research, the patient journey, and much more. Today on Moving Medicine Forward, we have a great discussion with Adam Robb, Vice President, Research Site Services at CTI. In this discussion, we take a deep dive into how our Clinical Research Center in Cincinnati, Ohio supports clinical research. We focus on the work that the site has done on vaccine trials, including how the site supported the COVID-19 vaccine trials during the pandemic. Take it away, Raina.
Good morning, Adam. Thank you for joining us for the podcast today. We're going to be talking about the Clinical Research Center, which we often refer to as the CRC. So we'll be saying CRC throughout this podcast, kind of going into some of the vaccine research. So tell us a little bit about your role. You oversee the operations, your position at the CRC, and kind of what the CRC is.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll sort of start with what the CRC is. And so it's a clinical research unit. So it's where we conduct the trials. CTI sort of globally manages trials. And so this is the part of the organization where we're actually conducting trials, where we're having patients come in and receive investigational product, and we're collecting data. So it is what we call a phase 1 through 4 all phase unit, where we're a multi-therapeutic unit. So we'll start off with the early phase. We have a 30-bed phase 1 unit. So we're doing clinical pharmacology studies there with mostly healthy volunteers, a few patient populations. And then we also have a really robust later phase program where we're doing a lot of work, as you mentioned, in vaccines. So we do quite a bit of work there, but we also have a real robust sleep medicine program where we're doing a lot of trials there. We have a psychiatrist as part of our team, so we do a lot of studies in that space, and as well as internal medicine, things like migraines and women's health and other areas. So we're very, very multi-specialty. And that kind of ties nicely into my job, which is just as Vice President of Research Site Services, is just to make sure we're doing all that to the highest degree of quality and providing useful and impactful data to our clients.
So since World Vaccine Congress just happened, we're talking about a lot about vaccines right now. I know CTI was part of the COVID-19 vaccine trials. Can we share some insights from that period and like how those trials were conducted and what changed?
Actually, it's one of my favorite times of conducting trials in my whole career. We were fortunate to be able to participate in a very early pivotal trial for one of the COVID vaccines that ultimately was approved. So we were conducting these trials in 2020 into 2021, obviously in the heat and depth of the pandemic. So it was a great experience and a little bit frightening, right? Everybody had to come into the office and conduct these trials. But we were amazed by how our team all really engaged in doing this. It was an opportunity to kind of get back to work and really do something about what was going on. But we also were just really blown away by our patients and the subjects that participated in the studies. We had just immense interest and interest from people that normally wouldn't participate in trials previously, to be honest. And I think hopefully that has opened some doors. But what we saw with those folks is really the altruistic element of conducting and being part of clinical trials was really, really big. We heard things from people saying, gosh, I'm sitting at home and I don't know what to do, and this was a great opportunity for them to at least do something, because there was a powerlessness, I think, that we all felt during that time. And then the other part of that period that was really great was really how collegial things were between the sites, the sponsors, CROs. Everybody was, as we always do, but let's be honest, in reality, there's a lot of things that get in the way, but everybody was really focused on how do we get this done? What needs to get done, less focused on, how do we do things from a policy perspective? And this is our standard and this is what we do. Obviously, we did not cut any corners when it came to human subject protection or safety or data quality. That was never, an issue. But it really just became, with those things in mind, what can we do to get this done quickly and provide really, really impactful data?
How did they talked about, it was a very quick change in how things were progressing throughout COVID. But how did that change the operational side of the CRC? And has any of that operation changed and stuck with the CRC and your processes moving forward?
100%, absolutely. Yeah. So we had always sort of prided ourselves on our ability to conduct high volume trials and make that work. We obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we have a clinical pharmacology unit, so we're used to doing more intense kind of work like that. But this was sort of at another level. We were enrolling subjects in 600-700 subjects in studies, and to do that, you really need to refine your processes and your infrastructure to support that. Not only from a recruitment standpoint, because everybody thinks about how do you get that many patients to participate, but now you have to manage 600-700 people on trial and make sure that, if they're having adverse events, that we're getting that data properly managed, that we're surveilling all these diaries that are being completed everywhere, and all of this information that's being, completed and entered every day by hundreds and hundreds of participants. We really had to refine our processes, and that has really allowed us to continue to execute these studies, I think, at a higher level than to be honest, we were doing before.
Yeah. And Jeremy, you mentioned World Vaccine Congress. We've attended for several years, and we've always been a part of the Vaccine Industry Excellence VIE Awards. This year, we were finalists for the Best Clinical Trial Company Award. What do you think makes us stand apart as a CRC, combined with a CRO, as a phase 1 unit site?
Absolutely. All those things you just said, right? I think it makes us a little bit unique. So, there are other CROs do have clinical pharmacology units, but not a ton have a full later phase program, big, robust vaccine program. So we're able to really provide support to our clients, from all aspects of the trial, right? Because we have the CRO component, we can support that end of it. We also have a modeling group that can really help from a sort of a consulting side of things, really work with our clients and sponsors to really help develop and design their programs and their trials in the most efficient way that they can do. And then, I think the fact that we are, sort of a larger unit, we have, people that specialize in regulatory, we have, and we can talk, I'm sure at some point more about our pharmacy, but we have an amazing pharmacy, investigational pharmacy state license on site. We have all of these things in place to really allow us to conduct these trials at a high degree.
So the pharmacy sounds pretty interesting. Like how does that support the trial as far as getting the drug into the patients?
Absolutely. So, I think that with, our pharmacy, again, it's a state licensed investigational pharmacy. So we're not competing with clinical activity, big. It's a licensed pharmacy. So we have just pharmacists that have access to this space, that are managing this IP, working with pharmacy technicians as well. But, they're really set up to really conduct these trials and make sure that we're getting the patients the right investigational product, of course, is obviously incredibly important, but they do things like consult with each patient and make sure they're getting that introduction to their IP and understanding of how they're supposed to take it if they're taking it at home. But, kind of pivoting back to the vaccine side of things, there's usually some level of some work that needs to be done in terms of preparation with these IPs. They can be stored in very, very deep freeze conditions that need to be thawed, and that has to be very specifically timed. There could be some elements of reconstitution that needs to occur. Obviously, you could be drawing them up into syringes. And so, these things occurring at a pharmacy, obviously, that is set up to do that is important. But then also having that dedicated pharmacy on site is crucial. We hear things a lot with other centers where, that pharmacy could be across campus. And then now how do you transport that IP? And when we're just transporting them across the hall, it really is a nice setup for us. And we're able to very efficiently and accurately dispense and administer IP.
Yeah, speaking of those efficiencies, we have the CRO, the site. There's also another step in here that we're kind of missing that we just recently added, which is the lab. Yeah. Can you speak to how we were interfacing with CTI labs to make some of these trials?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, we mentioned our early phase program. CTI Labs has a robust, bioanalytical capacity. So we've been able to work with them and partner with them and our clients to develop assays and to be able to do that kind of testing for the clients. Obviously, from a safety testing perspective, we're able to do that very, very efficiently, working with our own lab. And then, especially in vaccine studies, there's a lot of PBMC processing. And so they've, opened up that capacity to be able to do that kind of work, which is very, very, very specific, sort of ways in which that the samples need to be processed. But there's usually, a time sensitivity to that as well. So it's exactly, I think, 3.2 miles from the CRC is CTI Labs, our North American lab. So it's great access for us to be able to do that. And then really the data integration, because again, it's all in-house, right? So the data can transfer in and we can be much more efficient in what we do.
Earlier, you talked about the importance of getting a large number of patients, especially for the COVID vaccine trials, but just vaccine trials in general. Can you go into a little bit about the recruitment process and how you maintain a patient database and what that means for CRC vaccine trial recruitment?
Absolutely. Yeah. It all sort of starts with the recruitment efforts, and we have a dedicated recruitment department that is focused strictly on identifying participants for our studies. So they're the sort of first step and most important thing we have is our database. It's about 40,000 individuals. A lot of them are healthy volunteers, but a lot of them have a variety of different medical conditions that can be relevant to our studies. So they're going to start off, they're going to query that database based on the inclusion exclusion of that study. And that becomes what we call the call list for that study. And then they're going to blast that list. They're going to make sure everybody on that list is aware of this study. They're going to do that through IRB approved materials that our marketing team develops. And they're going to bring that awareness. But they're also just going to pick up the phone and they're going to call them all, one by one. Again, big team that can do that. And they're going to go through an IRB approved script to, again, more directly inform them of the study, educate them on that, but then go through a questionnaire as well to pre-screen them to see if they're a likely eligible participant for the study, and then get them scheduled into our unit. So that process, combined with our marketing team's ability to reach out to the community that we're here, there's over 2 million people in Greater Cincinnati, so we have a great catchment area to do that kind of effort. Leveraging our social media platforms and website, and as well as doing traditional marketing as well to the community has resulted in a lot of inbound activity. Again, to that same group that takes them through that same process. So those two things combined, but really, the secret sauce is that database, and that's something we're really proud of.
And can you speak to the importance of that for a sponsor? I mean, to have that database ready to go, to be able to get patients on board and enrolled in these trials fairly quickly. I mean, we have been a top enroller for several trials. Can you talk to the importance of that in a clinical trial?
Oh, really developing that database?
Yes, and having those patients be able to start off quickly, get that startup quick for the trials.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's what they're looking for. A lot of times these studies can move pretty quickly. So we have to, there's two parts to that. One is, yes, that having that dedicated recruitment team that can do that kind of high volume work and reach out to these folks. And the familiarity we breed with them all year round, right? So we're always in contact with our database and making sure they're aware of what's going on, that we know what's going on with them. Do we have the most up-to-date information on their medications and their medical history and things like that, and what their interests are, so that we can more efficiently reach out to people. So that, and then you combine that, with the clinical operations side, which is, are we prepared to handle that sort of quick volume of patients from, getting through for informed consent, and then going through these pretty, extensive screening visits, all the way up through randomization, and be able to manage that efficiently in line with the protocol, in line with good clinical practice, and really having all those teams kind of working together has really been what's allowed us to do all those things you just mentioned.
What's the most challenging part of conducting a vaccine trial?
I would say that the most challenging part is the variety of different systems. The eCOA and ePro systems that are brought into these things. I think they provide amazing data, and they're very important. The problem is that there's a lot of them, and so there's just a lot of different systems that we have to get familiar with. But then they also have to integrate within their systems as well. So the IRT needs to speak to the ePro or eCOA devices, and sometimes they don't speak to each other, and so then we end up with issues. And the other part of that is then we sort of end up being sort of the technical support for our subjects. So it sounds like we're complaining. It is the challenge. It's something we take on, and we know that the end result is really, really high quality data, which is what we all want. But it certainly is a challenge. And again, how do we manage that? We're monitoring, and we have people dedicated to do that sort of surveillance to make sure, are the subjects completing their diaries? Are we following back up with them? Are we really familiar with, on these devices, how they work and able to support them? And then working with our sponsors and CROs to make sure, hey, if we have a problem, can you address these things very quickly for us? Because sometimes that means there's a patient sitting in a room waiting. So we need to get quick resolution of these issues.
Why is vaccine research important? Why do we do this? Why do we move medicine forward in this capacity?
So I think that vaccine research is incredibly important for public health. If you look at things like smallpox and polio vaccines, these viruses and diseases have been a major problem over the years and devastated a lot of people. So the fact that we've either eradicated or nearly eradicated some of these things has been clearly impactful and easy for us to see. As vaccine research has evolved, we're seeing it going into other areas, even oncology. So I think that there's so much opportunity to impact a variety of diseases and viruses. And sometimes it's to eradicate them, like in the examples I give that are easy, very clear examples. And sometimes it's really to enhance our immune response so that we don't have as difficult outcomes with different viruses than you might have otherwise.
Right. We talked about COVID a lot, but what other types of vaccine trials are we currently running?
So right now we're doing, we do a lot of work in RSV. So the recently first vaccine ever approved for RSV, and we were fortunate enough to be a part of that. But we see a lot of work there: pneumococcal vaccines, HSV vaccines, just a large variety, CMV. So I looked at I think we've been involved over the years in I think about 14 different vaccine types over the years. So there's a lot of different vaccine programs out there, and we've been fortunate enough to be part of them. A lot of COVID, especially over the course of the last 4 years, but in influenza, of course, but in a lot of these different areas, HPV, C. diff, other things, we've really had an impact and seen some successes as well in other viruses.
Yeah. And I think it's important to also note, these weren't all vaccine trials, but as part of the CRC, we played a role in 95 drug approvals, which is a huge achievement. And to be able to advance medicine in that capacity as a phase 1 unit is incredible.
Absolutely. That's why we do it. Obviously, and to say, 95, and we have been a part of 8 vaccine approvals. So we've had quite a few successes there. So it is important for us to be part of successes. We want to be part of those and contribute impactful data to those efforts. But that's why we do this, right? When we have people who are taking medications every day, that they can do that with some level of confidence that medication has been evaluated to have some degree that it works and that it's safe. Is something I think that we may take for granted as a society, but it's really important. So that's why we do this. But we also like to say, though it's our preference to be part of approvals, it is a success if we, provide data that takes a medication or vaccine that really shouldn't be approved and provides data that says, let's move on, let's try a different course here.
Right, that's a good perspective to provide as well.
What excites you the most about being involved in clinical research?
I think it's that, just sort of like I said, it's the fact that, you get to impact lives because we all, at some point or another have, been involved in as a consumer or as a parent or, as a family member in engaging in, vaccines or in medications and and to have that confidence that is incredibly important is really a big part of what makes doing what we do every day worthwhile.
Where do you see clinical research going in the future as far as like from a site perspective? How do you think things are going to change and what excites you about that?
I think that, the thing that most clearly comes to mind is technology and how that can play a role in making our trials more efficient, enhancing the experience of our participants is incredibly important to really grow the involvement. I mean, I don't know the data off the top of my head, but it's a very small portion of society that actually participates in clinical trials. And, I think that growing that through making the process more palatable for participants is something that I look forward to seeing as we evolve in the industry. And I think that technology is a big part of that. And obviously, there's much smarter people that can tell you about the innovations in terms of the science and different kinds of exciting treatments. And I know CTI is involved in so many things in rare disease and cell and gene therapies and very exciting cutting edge things that are incredibly exciting. But I think from where we sit in sort of a clinical operations side of things, it's really trying to make these studies more efficient so we can provide good quality data, from almost the widest cross section of our community. Is really something we look forward to seeing evolve over the coming years.
So recently on an earlier episode that we had on the podcast, we got to talk to Dr. Curry about the Vaxion trial. And we did mention how we did a lot of the research here at the CRC. Speak to that. Tell us what that was like running that trial, which is kind of out of the scope of the vaccines and in a completely different area of research.
Absolutely. So we haven't had a lot of experience in that indication of cumulative peripheral neuropathy in the past. And it was really exciting to be a part of that project. In that we had, such engagement from the subjects, the participants, the patients in that trial. There was, such an engagement in their disease and their understanding of what they'd like to see and get an opportunity to take. They're very knowledgeable about what's out there. So that was a nice thing for us to see. And then this was a study where they had to have multiple administrations and there's cycles of infusions. So you really spend a lot of time with these participants and get to know them. And we could see the impact of their participation. It's a double-blind study, so we don't know anything about the efficacy, but it was definitely a rewarding experience for our team, and it seemed to be for the participants as well.
So you talked about they have multiple site visits that they're coming to as a patient. You have multiple trials running at once at the CRC. How, from an operational side of that, do you manage that? How do you make sure everything is running smoothly and coordinated and these visits aren't conflicting with other ones?
Yeah, so, just I think maybe starting off with how we sort of set up our infrastructure is that, we are large enough. So one of the things that scale allows is specialization, right? So we have, a variety of different teams. We have a team that does regulatory, submissions. So they're managing the essential documents and all the IRB submissions and that kind of work. So that our coordinators, who are sort of the day-to-day folks that manage the trials and are interacting with the subjects and collecting data, interacting with our sponsors and providing that data back. can really focus on doing just that. We also have, I mentioned the pharmacy group, so they're focused on that. We have an amazing lab team that is responsible for the collection, processing, storage, and shipment of all the samples that we collect every day. And we have, the recruitment team. We mentioned that, so they're focused on doing that. And so we have sort of folks sort of really working in the areas that they're most knowledgeable about, and they are allowed to focus on that. And then, as you mentioned, sort of you got so many trials going on, the CRC will have 25 to 30 studies going on at a given time. And so, we've got a lot of patients flowing through, which is great. And one of the ways we manage that is a large team. We have 9 dedicated study coordinators who are really dedicated because they're focused on the pieces that I just mentioned. But then we also have a team of research assistants that can support these visits, interact with the subjects as well, but also do a lot of that back-end data management and EDC data entry, and getting that data back to our clients. So it really, and we also have some robust systems, a CTMS system, and things that really help manage the day-to-day flow of activities. And I'd be remiss not to mention, obviously, an incredible team of investigators, right? So we have, multiple principal investigators that also serve each other as sub-investigators. So we'll have at least half dozen investigators on a trial. So they're able to see our patients and manage sort of the medical components of our trials, and of course, assessing inclusion, exclusion, adverse events, and those kinds of things. So,
and they have a diverse background and board certified in various capacities. So
yeah, absolutely,
expertise comes in.
For sure.
So we've talked a lot about the site. Let's hear about you. How did you get involved in clinical research?
Yeah, so I got involved in clinical research sort of through happenstance, which I think most people do. I don't think a lot of 12-year-olds grow up thinking about being a clinical research professional. But I was a psych undergrad, and back at that time that meant you were unemployed. So I graduated and I got a job at a sleep laboratory, of all things. It was a clinical sleep laboratory, so we were recording patients' sleep for diagnostic purposes. And so loved that job, but it was tough because it was a night gig, because that's when people sleep. So I was fortunate enough, to one day see that we were doing something a little bit different with some of the patients that were coming in. They said, tonight, this patient's in this study, and they're going to be receiving this medication at a very specific time. So you need to wake them up. You're going to provide them the investigational product at this time. Then you're going to wait this much time. You're going to do this procedure and this procedure and this procedure, and you're going to record things. And I was very intrigued about what is this? And come to find out, this is clinical research, and there's this organization doing this. And so, long story short, I became a clinical research coordinator and worked at a site level for 15 years. Kind of building a clinical research organization from a site perspective, and then I wanted to branch out and learn other elements of the industry. So was able to get a position as in a project management capacity at a CRO, so I could learn sort of all the activity that happens around and supports all that activity that's going on at these sites, right? So at the front end on getting a study prepared, and there's so much work needs to be done to not only select the right site, but really have everything in place to be able to conduct the trial. And obviously on the back end is ultimately, turning all this data into something consumable that can be used as part of FDA and other regulatory agency submissions. So that was a fascinating and impactful experience for me. And then I got an opportunity to work at a central IRB. So I was able to learn sort of the ethics and regulatory side of things, working as the director of operations for that organization for about 5 years. And then about 6 years ago, I got the opportunity to come to CTI at the Clinical Research Center. So we mentioned the CRC. and to kind of go back to my roots and be part of an organization that has all the broad services we mentioned. So it really gets to sort of bring everything that my career and my experiences have given me the opportunity to learn and to put that into practice in one place.
And maybe we have somebody young who's listening to this, and maybe not a 12-year-old saying, "Oh, I'm going to be clinical research." But if someone is listening to this and thinks they want to get into the clinical side of stuff, the clinical research side of things, what would you tell them? We'll give them a tip of how to go about it.
Yeah. I think that I think anything where you're focusing on the sciences, I think is going to allow you to move into this space. That's what's I think great about what we do is there's so many different roles and opportunities in clinical research. You don't have to go to medical school and become the lead scientist or principal investigator. But you can go the pharmacy route. You can go in sort of more of a science route. You can also be more of an operations person and really have your mind thinking about process improvement and those kinds of things, and project management. So there's just a lot of different ways to go. But I think just sort of staying in that science arena, and then I think that we're seeing more and more programs pop up at universities and other things. So just finding out what's available and pursuing those things, and then large organizations sometimes have internships and other opportunities. So I would direct them that way as well.
All right, Adam, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for tuning into the Moving Medicine Forward podcast. If you have more questions on how CTI can help your team move medicine forward, contact us by visiting our website at ctifacts.com/contact. And be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And to stay up to date with CTI, be sure to follow us on all social media channels.